This is part 2 of the series Leadership in World War III. Great leadership is required to handle the economic fallout that this World War III will bring on all of us. Some inspiration and tips can come from two economic superpowers, namely China and Japan. Have you ever wondered how come China is such a great world power? It is the second largest economy and is one of the most powerful nations in this world. How did this happen? To understand this, you'll have to understand the life and times of Mao Zedong. Mao was born in the year 1893 in Shaxian in the Hunan district. During this period, in the 1900s, there was widespread animosity against the Qing dynasty, which was ruling China at that time. The ruler at that time, Emperor Puyi, was becoming more and more unpopular because of his authoritarian nature. So a new party, the Kuomintang, was formed, and with the help of the Chinese army, they were able to overturn the monarch in a very bloody revolution called the Xinhai Revolution in the year 1911. In fact, Mao was also a part of this revolution. So revolution started when he was in school itself. Soon after schooling, in the year 1970, Mao moved to Beijing as an assistant to the librarian. This was very important for him because he had access to many books. He came under the influence of the librarian at the time, Li Dazhao. They together studied about Marxism and were convinced that the solution for China's problem was indeed Marxism and communism. The Kuomintang, that is the KMT, was growing in power, now in charge of the entire administration of China. In the year 1921, Li Dazhao and others founded the Communist Party of China. Mao was one of the founding members, went back to Hunan and was in charge of the Communist Party in Hunan. He was very much interested in the education of people as well as being able to support the ordinary peasants even at that stage. The Communist Party was now becoming more and more popular, and this angered the KMT or the Kuomintang. So in the year 1927, the Kuomintang, which had the army, massacred in Shanghai more than 300,000 communists. This was an outrage, and this was actually called the Shanghai Massacre. Mao was instructed by the Communist Party to commence building an army because they had no army to fight the Kuomintang. Mao had no other option but to recruit ordinary peasants and farmers to form what he called the Red Army. He was the commander-in-chief of the Red Army. He was able to wage war against the KMT. Bitter war and bitter fighting broke out during this period, 1927 to 31. Mao lost a lot. He lost many times. He lost the battle in Changsha. He lost his wife and sister who were beheaded by the KMT. Mao withstood all of this and still continued to fight a guerrilla warfare. In the year 1934, the KMT was really outraged and wanted to terminate the Red Army once and for all and made a final push. Mao, with only 1,000 army strength, fled the Jinggang mountains of Jiangxi, continued his warfare. During this period, his army was slowly getting decimated, and in the year 1934, he had to do what is called the Long March, where he was fleeing from the KMT. He was pursued for more than 7,000 miles, and finally, he landed up in Shanxi, in the northern part. During the guerrilla warfare, he attracted many simple peasants into the Red Army. He said, "Revolution is not a dinner party, nor an essay, nor a painting, nor a piece of embroidery. It cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another." Finally, with only 7,000 remaining soldiers, he was able to defeat the KMT. Mao was the undisputed leader of the Communist Party of China. Then the war broke out between China and Japan. Japan annexed Manchuria and was waging war with China. Mao had to join with the KMT to defeat the Japanese. Next, the World War came, and hence the Civil War was at rest. After the Second World War, the Civil War broke out between the Communist Party and the KMT, and ultimately the KMT was decimated in the year 1949, and Mao became the leader of the Communist Party and renamed the Communist Party of China to the People's Republic of China. Widespread reforms commenced as soon as Mao took over as premier. He abolished the rights of people to own any land. He began industrializing the nation, which was always an agrarian country. Widespread reforms for education as well as health were commenced. He also felt that arming the nation was important, and hence developed what was called the 2-bomb and 1 missile. And in the year 1956, 2 atom bombs and 1 long-range satellite was also installed in China. Mao was still getting impatient. He could not rapidly industrialize the nation. And in the year 1958, he brought about what is called the Great Leap Forward. This was, in a sense, making many agriculture units into industrial ones. He made stiff targets for steel production and wanted the nation to be industrialized rapidly. Unfortunately, in the year 1959, there was a severe drought in China and many people died of hunger. Mao was disheartened to some extent. He resigned in the year 1960 and the Great Leap Forward was abandoned in the year 1961. But the people never forgot about Mao. They knew that here was a visionary and his leadership was essential for their country to prosper. Mao reappeared as the leader in the year 1966, and after this, until his death in the year 1976, rapid industrialization happened. No longer was it communism, it was what is called Maoism, where Western technology was adopted. In 1952, only 17% of the Chinese workforce was employed in industry, and by the year 2012, over 67% of the workforce was in industry, making it the second largest economy in the world. On the 6th of August 1945, over the city of Hiroshima, it was at 9 a.m. in the morning, an American B-29 bomber dropped Little Boy. This was a powerful atom bomb which was exploded 2,000 feet above the sea level. The surface temperature on Hiroshima rose to 4,000 degrees centigrade. 80,000 people were immediately charred to death. On the 9th of August 1945, another atom bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and this killed about 40,000 people immediately. The President of the United States, Harry Truman, called this the power of the sun. Millions of people continued to die because of irradiation, sickness and burns in the aftermath. In the year 1946, for the first time, an oleander bloom, much to the relief of millions of Japanese, was seen in Hiroshima. Japan was always a warmongering nation. It was a monarchy for many years, but the army was equally powerful and they waged war on many countries such as China, Korea and other Southeast Asian countries. In the World War II, Japan was particularly powerful, and in the year 1941, December, they bombed Pearl Harbor, killing many Americans. And this infuriated the Allies. Bitter war between the Allies and Japan continued from year 1942 to 1944. In the year 1944, the Allied forces were able to capture the island of Saipan. This was a strategic move, and hence America was able to have a base by which they could coordinate bombing of Japan. Tokyo was almost completely razed to the ground, and all the big cities in Japan met the same fate. It was particularly brutal in the Battle of Okinawa during 1945, when over 70,000 of the Okinawan soldiers were killed and about 140,000 civilians were also killed. So by the end of the World War, when Emperor Hirohito announced the unconditional surrender of Japan to the Allied forces, on the 15th of August 1945, Japan was completely razed to the ground. There was absolutely no industry and the economy was almost a flat line. The Allied forces continued to remain in Japan until 1952. In the year 1949, they made Japan into a constitutional monarchy. The first Prime Minister was Yoshida. The country was burning to get back on its feet and stand on its own legs. What happened in the next few years amazed the entire world. So from the year 1950, 1968, the country had completely transformed. It became the second largest economy in the world. And this was called the economic miracle. How was this achieved? How could this happen in such a short time? This was completely fascinating to everybody. In the year 1949, Yoshida, the first Prime Minister, constituted what was called Ministry of International Trade and Industry. And this mainly comprised of cooperation amongst various people. The cooperation was actually divided into three groups. One was Keiretsu. What is Keiretsu? It is a small knit group mainly of suppliers, manufacturers, distributors and bankers. They formed a tight-knit group. Complete honesty and transparency between this group was seen. The second important group was between the government bureaucrats, the top government bureaucrats and all the big corporations. This was another strong group. Complete transparency and honesty between these two groups. Third was Sushlin Koya. Now this was essentially giving a lifetime guarantee of job to the workers by corporations. So these three, Keiretsu, Shunto and Shilin Koyo, were the backbone of this cooperation. This cooperation led to hard work by everybody. Long hours was the norm in Japan at that time. Women were recruited into the workforce, and complete honesty and transparency amongst people led to the economic revival of Japan with the growth rate of over 350%, which was amazing. The people of Japan have to be appreciated for this. You go to Japan even today, you don't see big war memorials, you don't see big war heroes, or you don't see these heroes that revived the economy. Everybody is just working very hard. The economic miracle, which continued beyond the 60s into the 70s until the Cold War, then it plateaued, but it still continues. This is the miracle that was all due to cooperation. Chairman Mao transformed his economically backward agricultural country into an economic superpower with great military strength, mainly by revolution. Japan rose from the ashes by cooperation, not by competition, as many people think. In any case, both these nations came up by mobilizing people power. They channelized the energies of people and their talents and achieved great heights. The need of the hour is a revolution to become self-reliant. Cooperation amongst all individuals. Become vocal about local. We should certainly start using locally made products. The next motorcycle or car should almost certainly be a locally made one. We should also start using locally made soaps, detergents and other local items that we need for everyday use. And this is certainly going to help the local industry.